Welcome, all to the Social Studies News Network. I'm your host, Mrs. Mofo. Today's news segment is called Global Interactions. For those of you new to Global Interaction segment, we will be traveling across the globe to interview what it's like to live in different parts of the world. I'm inclined to ask you to title your notes today, Geography Rules. To show our first geography rule, we will be meeting Mr. By the Equator, Mr. Mid-Latitude, and Miss Arctic. To make the note-taking easier, our editing committee prides themselves on putting keywords and terms in the video in the bottom of the screen, so be sure to record any words in the video down in your notes. For practice, rule number 1, climate affects where people live and how people trade. This should be in your notes. Over to you, Mr. By the Equator.
Hello, Miss Mofo. Mr. Blythe Equator here. How can I help you today?
Mr. By the Equator, can you describe where you are and what it's like to live in your location?
Well, I live here in Brazil, right along the equator. On a map, the equator goes clear around the center of the globe. Other places that are close to the equator include the southern tip of India, Ecuador, northern Australia, Indonesia, and more. What all these places have in common is being in direct sunlight all year round. As you can imagine, summer is pretty much year-round season here. We get quite a bit of rain here in Brazil too, since we have a tropical rainforest. Not every climate near the equator has the exact same climate though. Other places may have tropical rainforests, or even subtropical, which is slightly less tropical. It's pretty remote here, but we got easy access to resources along the coast where I live. But if you like going to the beach or eating some tropical fruit, this would be the perfect place to live. Some people just like to visit, but the views here are stunning.
Thank you, Mr. Vibe. We will be back to you in just a moment, while we hear from one of our other sources, Mr. Mid-Latitude. Mr. Mid-Latitude, tell us, where are you and what it's like to live in your location?
Well, I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, representing all the places around the world that live in the mid-latitudes, which are not quite near the north or south poles and not along the equator. We are right in between. Most people in the world really like living in places like where I live in Georgia because of the mild climates that we have in all 4 seasons. Some people would argue that the Mediterranean climate, like found in Southern California or in countries along the Mediterranean like Italy or Greece, have some of the best climates because it is as humid as it is here in Georgia, but all of our climates are pretty mild.
So, why do you think lots of people like living in your location?
Well, I think for one thing, transportation and trade is easier. Purchasing a home and then heating it can take a lot less energy to heat. You can also grow all kinds of food in these temperatures, like tropical fruits along the equator or coffee that you can't grow anywhere else. While people would probably prefer to live in a more mild climate between hot and cold, I think most people would choose hot. Like Mr. Black said, places with mild climates often have really large cities that can also get goods and a variety of food from other rural locations. There are more roads built in cities, more airports to make trade even more open to international markets. With places that have big cities like here in Georgia, there are more roads and airports to help make trade and travel easier. So that seems like a huge appeal to me.
Thank you both for letting us know why climates that are mild to hot climates along the equator and in the center of the globe are places people like to live and make trade easier. Let's hear from our other global interaction candidates, Mrs. Arctic. It's great to be with you today. Internet access here is pretty limited, so if I lose you, please call me back. Are you outside right now, Mrs. Arctic? Can you describe your location and what its climate and trade is like?
Of course, Miss Mofo. I'm outside right now, and I've had to bundle up. I live far from the equator, near the Arctic Circle. Places far from the equator are known for their colder climates. People would use words like Arctic, subarctic, polar, tundra, permafrost, or continental to describe climates far from the equator. It's pretty much cold here year-round, and the winter is the main season. While I can step inside to a rather fancy place, this modern igloo that you see before you, most people would have to be creative with what type of home they would build to survive the extreme climates.
People do not choose to live in colder climates. Why is this, Miss Arctic?
Well, it can be pretty isolating. There are not a lot of cities or roads built here, so the trade is more difficult. Driving cars or landing airplanes in snow can be very dangerous. It can be difficult to access food. As you can see, my home is like a greenhouse, so we can grow some of our own food. We have to be more creative. Amazon Prime won't offer free delivery to us, so while it's beautiful, as you can see, things like the Northern Lights or the Southern Lights for people, who live in the Southern Hemisphere, close to the South Pole, not many people choose to live here. It takes a lot of tough character.
Thank you, Miss Arctic. What's this? Justin? 2 more guest speakers for our global interactions, Mr. Deserts are arid, and Miss Highlander. Mr. Deserts are arid, are you there? Can you tell us what it's like to live where you are?
Man, it's dry out here in the Garden of the Gods. I'm Mr. Deserts are arid, reporting to you from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Arid climates are found in all different lines of latitude. They are created usually by a rain shadow effect from nearby mountain ranges. A lot of people think that arid desert climates are hot, but actually they're just very dry. Dry climates can change temperatures drastically. You see, I live in Colorado and it can be 90 degrees outside and you wouldn't break a sweat. And then the next day, it can be hailing ice pellets. Not many people live in dry, arid climates or semi-desert climates because of the lack of fresh water.
Wow, I hate to interrupt the segment and come in out of turn, but I just can't help myself. Mr. Deserts are arid. I live in Colorado too, but I live up in the Rocky Mountains. There are few people that live up here, but I never realized that the mountains I live in is one of the reasons that a climate could be so dry. The climate here is called highland climate. Highland climates are found in the mountains, aka high lands. Even though I live in the Rocky Mountains, the more north you are and the more north you go from the equator, the colder the Rocky Mountains can get. And the closer to the equator, the more mild the climate is here. Even other mountain ranges like the Himalayas are on the same line of latitude, but they have a much different climate. So you learn something every day, huh? Yeah, I can relate with Miss Arctic from earlier in the segment because mountain locations have very few people that live in them, and so the trade and the travel is just more difficult. Well, this has been a great addition to our global interactions. Hopefully we all learned the main ideas of our geography rule. Number 1, climates impact where people live and trade. It is safe to conclude that most people choose to live in mild to hotter climates for a number of reasons, and few people choose to live far from the equator due to the harsh climate. Thank you again to all of our global connections. This is Miss Mofo from the Social Studies News Network, signing off.